Hello, everyone, and welcome to Podcast with Guest from the Past. I'm your host, Arthur. Guys, you won't believe who I have with me today. Literally, someone I never imagined I'd meet, and certainly not in this way. The concept of our episode today is a bit strange, but it opens the door to an extraordinary conversation with a world-changing figure. Prepare yourselves, because seated across from me right now is the one and only Leonardo da Vinci. It's a tremendous honor, Master Leonardo. Thank you for being here. To start, let's go back to the very beginning. Can you tell us a little about your early life growing up in Vinci and Florence, and what first sparked your incredible curiosity about the world around you?
Yes, Leonardo da Vinci. Though to find myself here, in this enclosure, speaking across time, is a marvel that beggars belief, a peculiar dream it feels. Arthur, you say, and this podcast, a device that captures voice and sends it. Where? Fascinating. But yes, my early life. I was born in Vinci, a small Tuscan village nestled amongst the olive groves and vineyards. My father was Ser Piero, a notary. My mother, Caterina, a peasant girl. It was a childhood surrounded by nature, the flow of the Arno River, the flight of birds, the intricacies of plants and insects. These were my first teachers. From the earliest age, I felt an insatiable urge to observe, to look closely, to understand why things are as they are. Why does water swirl in such patterns? How do wings hold a bird aloft? What makes the human face express joy or sorrow? My formal schooling was rudimentary, but my mind was always, shall we say, self-instructing. In Florence, where I was later sent to the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio, I learned not only painting and sculpture, but also mechanics, metallurgy, chemistry. Verrocchio, he was a master of many crafts. He taught me that art is not merely mimicking nature, but understanding her principles. The curiosity was always there, burning. A desire to dissect, to measure, to draw, to know the hidden structure beneath the visible surface. It was a compulsion. It still is.
That is fascinating, Master Leonardo. You describe this insatiable urge to observe as a compulsion, a desire to understand the hidden structure. You mentioned your time in Florence and the workshop of Andrea del Verrocchio. Could you tell us more about that period? What was it like training under Verrocchio, and how did that environment learning not just art but also mechanics and other crafts shape your approach to the world, and eventually lead to the incredible range of work you would pursue?
Verrocchio's workshop. A crucible of learning, indeed. It was not merely a place for painting altarpieces and portraits. Andrea was a master goldsmith, a sculptor, a bronze caster, an engineer of sorts. He worked with metal, with clay, with pigments, with perspective. Imagine it, Arthur, a space bustling with activity, the smell of oils and turpentine mingling with the clang of hammers on metal, the dust of marble. Here, I was not just taught to apply paint to a panel. I was taught to see the bones beneath the skin, the mechanics of a joint, the play of light on different surfaces. Verrocchio understood that to depict nature truly, one must first understand her. He demanded rigor, precision. He would set us to tasks that required not just a steady hand, but a thinking mind. Learning sculpture, for example, taught me about form in 3 dimensions, how light and shadow define volume. Working with mechanics opened my eyes to the forces that govern movement, the levers and weights that build a machine or animate a body. This environment, it did not silo knowledge. It showed me that art, science, engineering, they are not separate islands. They are interconnected pathways to understanding the same miraculous creation. My time there cemented the idea that observation must be coupled with investigation. To paint a bird in flight, I needed to understand the air, the structure of the wing, the muscles that powered it. This approach, born in Verrocchio's bottega, became the bedrock of all my pursuits. It fueled that compulsion you mentioned, to not just depict the world, but to decipher its secrets. It is why I could never be content with just one discipline.
That is incredibly insightful, Master Leonardo. You described this environment in Verrocchio's workshop as a place that showed you that art, science, and engineering are not separate, but interconnected paths to understanding. Can you recall a specific early project or perhaps a particular natural phenomenon that you began to study where this merging of disciplines first truly took hold? Something where you consciously applied both your artistic observation and your budding scientific curiosity.
Yes, a specific instance. You ask for the moment when this melding of observation and inquiry truly solidified beyond the workshop walls. Perhaps it was my fascination with water. Even as a youth, watching the Arno or the streams near Vinci, I was captivated by its movement. Not just how it flowed, but the patterns within the flow. The eddies, the ripples, how it behaved when it met an obstacle, how it carved the earth over time. To draw water accurately, to paint it so it felt alive, required intense observation of its surface, its color, the way it reflected the sky and surrounding banks. That is the artistic eye at work. But my mind would not stop there. Why did it swirl in that precise manner? What forces shaped those ephemeral forms? I began to study not just the appearance of water, but its nature. I would drop things into it, watch how the disturbance propagated. I would build small channels to see how the flow changed with the incline or width. This was the beginnings of understanding fluid dynamics, the science and, yes, the engineering of it. How could one build a mill or divert a river if one did not understand the principles of water's power and behavior? To depict water in a painting became more than just rendering its look. It became about capturing its energy, its force. This required the artist to be a physicist, an engineer, observing the world not just for beauty, but for truth. The study of water was a constant teacher, showing me that the most beautiful depiction arises from the deepest understanding.
That is a profound connection. Master Leonardo, that the most beautiful depiction comes from the deepest understanding. How did this philosophy, this integrated approach to art and science, influence the actual commissions and projects you took on later in your career? How did it shape the kind of artist and engineer you became?
Yes, the commissions. They were varied, and my approach, it certainly shaped what I sought and what I created. When a patron desired a painting, say, a portrait, others might see only the face and the clothing, but I saw the structure beneath, the skull, the muscles that animated the expression. To paint a hand, I must know the bones, the tendons. This required studying anatomy, a pursuit not typically seen as part of the painter's craft, and one that carried some risk, I might add. For larger works, like The Last Supper, I was not merely placing figures around a table. I was trying to capture the very movement of the soul, the reaction of 13 men to a shattering statement. This required understanding human emotion, yes, but also perspective light, how bodies occupy space, and the engineering projects, the designs for fortifications, for bridges, for diverting rivers. These were not just calculations. They required an artistic eye to see the landscape, to understand the flow and form of the land and water. My designs for flying machines, they came directly from dissecting birds, understanding the mechanics of wings and air. It meant I could never settle for a surface understanding. Every problem, whether artistic or mechanical, was an opportunity to delve deeper into nature's workings. This often meant my process was slower, more demanding. Sometimes, patrons grew impatient. They wanted a finished work, while I was still consumed with understanding the fundamental principles behind it. It shaped me into someone who saw no firm boundary between observing beauty and understanding how it functions. The painter must be a scientist, the scientist an artist. They illuminate each other.
That is a fascinating insight, Master Leonardo, that the painter must be a scientist and vice versa. It sounds like this dedication to understanding deeply sometimes made the creative process perhaps less conventional or even more challenging. Thinking about your most iconic works like the portrait of Lisa del Giocondo, the Mona Lisa as it's known today, could you share how this integrated approach, this blend of observation and scientific understanding, specifically influenced its creation? Were there particular aspects you focused on because of your deeper knowledge of anatomy or light or perspective? And was there a story or a specific challenge behind bringing that particular work to life?
Ah, the portrait of Lisa del Giocondo. La Gioconda, as some called her. Yes, that work consumed me for a considerable time, years, in fact. And it is a prime example of this very philosophy you speak of. To paint a face, one could simply apply color and delineate form. But to capture a living soul, that is another matter entirely. When I looked at her, or any sitter, I did not just see the surface. My studies of anatomy, often conducted in secrecy and under difficult conditions, meant I understood the structure beneath the flesh, the subtle curve of the cheekbone, the musculature around the mouth that allows for a smile or a frown, the way the skin stretches over the bone. This knowledge, it informed every brushstroke, allowing me to model the form not as a flat representation, but as a volume with depth and life. Consider the hands, often neglected by other painters. I knew the intricate network of bones and tendons, how they articulate. This allowed me to paint hands that feel like flesh and blood, capable of movement. Then there was the matter of light and shadow, my beloved sfumato. It was not merely a technique, but an application of understanding how light diffuses, how shadows soften edges, how this interplay creates the illusion of roundness and form. The landscape behind her. It was not just a backdrop. I sought to understand the principles of atmospheric perspective, how the air itself affects color and clarity over distance, making distant mountains appear blue and hazy. It was about capturing the subtle breathing of the world around her. The challenge? Beyond the technical, it was capturing something elusive, that expression, that hint of a smile that seems to shift depending on how you look. It required not just observing the physical, but trying to sense the inner life. It is why the work was never truly finished in my mind. One could always delve deeper, refine further. It demanded everything: the artist's eye, the anatomist's knowledge, the physicist's understanding of light and air. They were all essential.
That integrated approach, where understanding the world deeply informs your creation, is so evident not just in your art, but in your incredible designs for machines, bridges, and even flying apparatuses found in your notebooks. Where did the impetus for these engineering and invention projects come from? Was it a separate drive from your art? or a continuation of that same desire to understand and shape the world? And what were the practical challenges you faced in trying to bring these often revolutionary ideas to life in your era?
Ah, the machines, the inventions. You ask if the impetus was separate from the art? No, no, not at all. It was the same root, the same deep current of curiosity applied to a different facet of creation. If I saw the beauty in the curve of a muscle, I also saw the ingenious mechanism of the joint it moved. If I observed the patterns in water, I also saw its power to turn a wheel or carve a channel. The desire was always to understand how things worked, to dissect the world, not just with a scalpel for anatomy, but with the mind for mechanics and forces. My notebooks, those thousands of pages, they are filled with designs not because I wished to be a mere inventor for invention's sake, but because understanding the principles of nature led inevitably to seeing how those principles could be applied, how they could move things, how they could lift things, how they could mimic nature's own wondrous devices, like the wing of a bird. The challenge in bringing these ideas to life. Ah, that was often considerable. Paper and ink can hold a design, but to build a machine requires materials, requires skilled hands, working with precision. That was sometimes difficult to achieve. One might conceive of a flying machine, understanding the necessary lift and structure, but finding wood or metal that is both strong and light enough, fabricating parts with the exactitude required for the mechanism to function. That was the struggle. Patronage was needed, resources, access to workshops capable of such work, and sometimes, perhaps, the ideas outpaced the practical means available in my time, but the drive remained to move from understanding to application. Art and engineering were simply different languages for expressing the same fundamental truths about the world's elegant design.
Master Leonardo, you mentioned that your process could be slower, more demanding, and that patrons sometimes grew impatient, despite needing their support for resources and workshops. How did you navigate those relationships? Figures like the Medici or the King of France were powerful patrons. How did they view this integrated approach of yours, this blend of deep scientific inquiry and artistic creation? Was it understood and valued, or did it sometimes lead to difficulties in securing or maintaining their support for projects that weren't purely conventional? Master Leonardo, you mentioned that your process could be slower, more demanding, and that patrons sometimes grew impatient, despite needing their support for resources and workshops. How did you navigate those relationships? Figures like the Medici or the King of France were powerful patrons. How did they view this integrated approach of yours, this blend of deep scientific inquiry and artistic creation? Was it understood and valued, or did it sometimes lead to difficulties in securing or maintaining their support for projects that weren't purely conventional?
Ah, yes, the patrons, the Medici the Sforza, the King of France. They were the source of sustenance, the earth from which the work might grow, but navigating their expectations, it was a delicate dance. They desired splendor status works that proclaimed their power or piety, a magnificent altarpiece, a striking portrait, a formidable fortress. My approach, this delving into the very bones and sinews of nature for a painting or studying the patterns of smoke for a design, it was not always what they anticipated. They wanted the fruit. I was consumed with understanding the root and the soil. This often led to, shall we say, a certain impatience. My projects could be slow in coming to fruition, because the inquiry itself was as compelling to me as the final object. I would embark on a commission for a painting, but find myself sidetracked for months studying the flight of birds, believing it necessary to truly render angels or allegorical figures aloft, or tasked with diverting a river. I would first map the currents, the geology, the very personality of the water, far beyond the immediate engineering problem. Some understood, or perhaps simply tolerated it for the results. Francis I of France. He seemed to grasp something of the breadth of my interests, keeping me near him not just as a painter, but as a thinker, a discounter of nature's secrets. But often, yes, it led to difficulties. They paid for a specific outcome, and I offered a journey of discovery that sometimes felt endless to them. It was a constant tension, this need for their support countered by my own relentless need to know. They valued the finished product, the visible mastery. I valued the invisible understanding that made the mastery possible. It was a divide not easily bridged.
That tension you describe, Master Leonardo, between the patron's desire for a finished work and your own relentless need to understand the fundamental principles behind it, it sounds like a constant negotiation. How did you navigate those relationships, particularly with powerful figures like dukes or kings? Were there times when this deep inquiry into nature, especially your anatomical studies which you mentioned were done in secrecy and carried risk, or perhaps some of your scientific ideas, caused you trouble with the religious or societal authorities of your time? How did you balance your passion for knowledge, which sometimes defied conventional boundaries, with the demands or potential restrictions placed upon you by the world you lived in?
The tightrope walk. Yes, you describe it well. Navigating the desires of patrons, those powerful figures who held the purse strings, while pursuing the deeper questions. It was a constant negotiation, a subtle art in itself. One could not simply ignore their demands, for without their coin, the inks would dry and the canvases remain bare. So, one would endeavor to show progress, to explain, perhaps in glimpses, the why behind the meticulous study, to demonstrate that the time spent understanding the flight of a bird would ultimately allow for a more convincing angel, that studying the flow of water would lead to a better engineered canal, or a more lifelike ripple in a painting. Some grasped it better than others. Some were simply impatient for the finished display of wealth or piety. It required patience, and sometimes, yes, a degree of strategic delay, while the true work of discovery unfolded. As for the anatomical studies, you are correct. It was a path fraught with difficulty, and secrecy was paramount. To truly understand the body, to paint it with truth and not mere approximation, one had to see beneath the skin. One had to dissect. And this often trespassed upon deeply held beliefs, seen by some as a defilement interfering with God's creation. The church, the authorities, they could indeed pose a grave threat. I had to be discreet work, often in the dead of night, in hidden places. There were times when suspicions arose, when questions were asked. One had to be cautious to rely on the goodwill of certain patrons, perhaps those with a more pragmatic or less strictly pious view, who valued the knowledge gained, even if the method was unorthodox. My work in other areas, the engineering, the more conventional art, often provided a shield, a value that outweighed the potential controversy of the anatomical pursuits. It was a balance struck between the insatiable hunger for knowledge, which demanded this investigation into the structure of life, and the need to survive and continue the work. One could not afford to be reckless, but neither could one abandon the pursuit of truth simply because it was difficult or dangerous. It was a constant act of finding the path forward without sacrificing the core purpose, which was always, to see and to understand.
That balancing act sounds incredibly challenging, Master Leonardo. You mentioned the risks involved in your anatomical studies, the need for secrecy due to deeply held beliefs of the time. Did your pursuit of knowledge, particularly in areas like anatomy, or perhaps some of your more unconventional scientific ideas, ever directly bring you into conflict or cause significant trouble with the religious or societal authorities of your era? How did you manage that tension? The drive to uncover truths that might challenge accepted views, with the very real restrictions and potential dangers you faced.
The conflicts, yes, the pursuit of knowledge, particularly when it meant peering into the forbidden structures of the body. It was a path fraught with peril. You see, the prevailing view, dictated often by the Church, was that the tampering with the dead, dissecting human forms, was sacrilegious. It was seen as disrespecting God's creation, interfering with the soul's journey. My need, my absolute necessity to understand the mechanics of life, the origin of movement, the workings of muscle and bone. It drove me to it nonetheless. But it required extreme caution. I could not simply announce my intentions or work openly. It meant seeking access to cadavers quietly, often through channels one might not speak of in polite company. It meant working swiftly, under the cover of night, in places far from prying eyes. There were times, yes, when whispers circulated, when suspicions arose. The climate was one where unconventional ideas, especially those challenging established dogma or traditions, could attract unwanted attention, even accusations of heresy or witchcraft. I was fortunate in some respects. My utility in other areas, my skills in engineering for warfare or irrigation, my ability to create works of art that pleased powerful patrons, often provided a degree of protection. It meant I was valuable, and that value could sometimes outweigh the discomfort my less conventional studies caused. Patrons like Francis I, he understood the breadth of my interests, saw the connection between the different pursuits. But it was a constant tightrope walk. One had to be careful with one's words, careful with whom one shared one's deepest findings. The drive to uncover the truth, to lay bare nature's secrets, was relentless. But survival and the ability to continue that work demanded prudence and, at times, absolute secrecy. It was a balance struck between the hunger to know and the need to remain, undisturbed by the forces of the time.
That balancing act sounds incredibly challenging, Master Leonardo. Speaking of grand works that took significant time, The Last Supper is another iconic piece that is renowned not just for its artistic brilliance, but also for the innovative, though perhaps ultimately problematic, techniques you employed. How did your integrated approach, that blend of deep understanding of anatomy, perspective, and human emotion, specifically come into play when creating such a complex narrative scene? And what were the significant challenges you faced in bringing that particular work to life, especially considering the scale and the demands of the location and your patrons, the Dominican friars?
The Last Supper, Il Cenacolo, a work of immense ambition and, yes, immense difficulty. To capture that pivotal moment, the instant Christ declares, "One of them will betray him," that required more than simply drawing figures around a table. It required understanding the very tumult of the soul. My studies of anatomy were crucial, not just the bones and the muscles, but how these are moved by internal emotion. How does surprise manifest in the tilt of the head? How does denial show in the gesture of a hand? Each figure, each apostle, I strove to give them a distinct and truthful reaction, drawing upon my observations of people, of their passions and humors. The perspective, too, was paramount. I designed the scene to appear as an extension of the refectory room itself, using the principles of perspective to draw the viewer's eye towards the central figure of Christ, making the space feel real, inhabitable. The challenge, the challenge was manifold. Firstly, the scale, a vast wall, and secondly, the medium. Traditional fresco painting on wet plaster, it sets quickly, it demands speed. I desired more time to blend colors, to achieve the subtle gradations, my beloved sfumato. So I experimented. I used tempera and oil on the dry plaster. In theory, it allowed for greater detail and refinement. In practice, on that wall, in that environment, it was a poor choice. The moisture, the materials, they did not hold. It began to deteriorate even in my lifetime, a source of considerable frustration. And the friars, the patrons, they had their own expectations for their dining hall. It was a constant struggle to balance the artistic vision with the practical constraints and the limitations of materials. It was a grand undertaking, attempting to freeze in time the shockwave of a single sentence, using every tool at my disposal, from understanding the body to understanding the human heart.
That integrated approach, where understanding the world deeply informs your creation, is so evident not just in your art, but in your incredible designs for machines, bridges, and even flying apparatuses found in your notebooks. Where did the impetus for these engineering and invention projects come from? Was it a separate drive from your art, or a continuation of that same desire to understand and shape the world? And what were the practical challenges you faced in trying to bring these often revolutionary ideas to life in your era?
The machines, the inventions. You ask if the impetus was separate from the art. No, no, not at all. It was the same root, the same deep current of curiosity applied to a different facet of creation. If I saw the beauty in the curve of a muscle, I also saw the ingenious mechanism of the joint it moved. If I observed the patterns in water, I also saw its power to turn a wheel or carve a channel. The desire was always to understand how things worked, to dissect the world, not just with a scalpel for anatomy, but with the mind for mechanics and forces. My notebooks, those thousands of pages, they are filled with designs, not because I wished to be a mere inventor for invention's sake, but because understanding the principles of nature led inevitably to seeing how those principles could be applied, how they could move things, how they could lift things, how they could mimic nature's own wondrous devices like the wing of a bird. The challenge in bringing these ideas to life, that was often considerable. Paper and ink can hold a design, but to build a machine requires materials, requires skilled hands, working with precision that was sometimes difficult to achieve. One might conceive of a flying machine, understanding the necessary lift and structure, but finding wood or metal that is both strong and light enough, fabricating parts with the exactitude required for the mechanism to function. That was the struggle. Patronage was needed, resources, access to workshops capable of such work. And sometimes, perhaps, the ideas outpaced the practical means available in my time. But the drive remained to move from understanding to application. Art and engineering were simply different languages for expressing the same fundamental truths about the world's elegant design.
That balancing act sounds incredibly challenging, Master Leonardo. You mentioned the risks involved in your anatomical studies, the need for secrecy due to deeply held beliefs of the time. But looking across the entirety of your work, especially evident in the thousands of pages of your notebooks filled with sketches, observations, and designs for inventions that seem far ahead of their time, many of which were never built or completed. How do you view these notebooks today? Were they primarily a workspace for future projects, a personal record of your investigations, or something else? And is there a sense of regret, perhaps, about the many grand ideas that remained only on paper, that never saw the light of day as physical creations?
My notebooks. Yes, those thousands of pages. You have seen them, then. It is strange to think of them being examined so long after the ink dried. Were they a workspace, a record? They were all of these things, and more. They were my constant companion, the repository of my sight and my thought. When an idea sparked, whether observing the flight of a dragonfly or contemplating the structure of a dome, it went into the book. When I dissected a cadaver, the drawings and notes went into the book. When I devised a mechanism for lifting weight, the diagrams went into the book. They were the crucible where art and science mingled freely, where a sketch of a human figure could sit beside a study of geological strata or a plan for a flying machine. They were the physical manifestation of that relentless curiosity, that need to understand the whole weave of creation. A workspace, yes, for ideas were tried out, refined, discarded. Born anew on the page, a record undoubtedly of observations made, of questions posed, of truths uncovered, but also a repository of dreams. And yes, Arthur, to answer your question about regret, seeing the sheer number of these designs, these concepts that remained only on paper, there is a natural melancholy, one conceived of aqueducts that could carry water effortlessly, of bridges that could span great distances with elegance, of machines that could make men fly like birds. And many of these remained unrealized. The resources were lacking, the time, the specific circumstances. Or perhaps the idea was simply a step in the larger journey of understanding, a necessary drawing to clarify a principle, even if the final machine could not be built then. Is it regret? Perhaps a wistful acknowledgement of the limitations of one lifetime. But the drive was not solely to build every single thing conceived, but to understand the principles that would allow them to be built. The knowledge gained in designing the flying machine was valuable in itself, even if I never soared like the birds I studied. So, while the unbuilt creations represent paths not fully walked, the notebooks themselves are proof that the journey of discovery was constant and rich. They are the enduring record of that restless mind, always reaching, always seeking to see and to know.
That balancing act sounds incredibly challenging, Master Leonardo. You mentioned the risks involved in your anatomical studies, the need for secrecy due to deeply held beliefs of the time. But looking across the entirety of your work, especially evident in the thousands of pages of your notebooks filled with sketches, observations, and designs for inventions that seem far ahead of their time, many of which were never built or completed. How do you view these notebooks today? Were they primarily a workspace for future projects, a personal record of your investigations, or something else? And is there a sense of regret, perhaps, about the many grand ideas that remained only on paper, that never saw the light of day as physical creations?
Yes, the notebooks and the question of regret for the unfinished. It is a thoughtful query. You see, Arthur, while the mind conceived of many wonders, the world with its limitations of materials, of time, of patronage, often prevented their full realization? Is there regret, perhaps a natural sadness, that some of these grand designs, the machines that might lift man to the sky, the structures that could reshape the land, remained confined to the page? But one must also consider the value of the pursuit itself. Those notebooks are not merely failed attempts at building. They are the record of a mind wrestling with nature's secrets. The hours spent dissecting a bird's wing to design a flying machine, the calculations for diverting a river, the studies of gears and levers, the knowledge gained in that process, the deeper understanding of why and how nature works, that was the true reward. It was the foundation for all my work, whether painting a face or planning a city's defenses. The notebooks are a map of that journey of understanding. So, while the physical absence of some creations can evoke a melancholy sigh, the enduring legacy is in the exploration, in the relentless quest to see the world with clearer eyes. They are, in a sense, complete in themselves, as a testament to that unending inquiry. They are the whispers of ideas that perhaps await a time, such as this one you inhabit, where the means exist to make them roar to life.
That's a beautiful way to put it, Master Leonardo, that the notebooks are complete in themselves, and whispers of ideas that perhaps await a time where the means exist to make them roar to life. Thinking about that, and given that you are, improbably, here with me in my time, how does this era, with its quite different level of technology and understanding, appear to you? Do you see echoes of your own inquiries in the way we fly, or understand the body, or move water? What aspects of our world, viewed through your eyes, are the most surprising or perhaps even resonate with those dreams captured in your notebooks?
Ah, yes, the whispers and the roar. You ask how this era, this present world appears to me. It is overwhelming, a spectacle beyond imagining, to see metal birds, colossal birds, not just soaring, but carrying scores of people across the very sky I spent so long studying and sketching. The curvature of the wing, the principles of lift. To see it realized on such a scale, it is breathtaking. And the water. You speak of moving water. We sought to divert rivers for irrigation, for power. But the scale of your structures, the aqueducts, the way you command the very flow of great volumes, astonishing. And the body, you have devices that can see within a living person, that can mend parts, replace parts. My anatomical studies, conducted with such secrecy and difficulty, were but faint scratches at the surface compared to the depth of understanding you seem to possess of the body's inner workings. It is humbling and exhilarating. Many of the questions I posed, many of the mechanisms I drew in the notebooks, seem to have found their answer, their form, here. That desire to mimic nature's efficiency, to understand her forces and apply them. I see echoes of that everywhere. The speed of your transport, the complexity of your communication devices. It all speaks to a relentless drive to conquer distance and ignorance. What surprises me most, perhaps the sheer ubiquity of these wonders, that such power, such knowledge, is so widespread. In my time, such feats would be the work of a lifetime, requiring princely resources. Here, it seems almost commonplace. It resonates deeply. Yes, to see these dreams, these whispers from my pages, amplified unto a roar that reshapes the world. It is a profound satisfaction, a confirmation that the pursuit was not in vain. But it also raises new questions, always new questions.
Master Leonardo, that image of whispers from your notebooks becoming a roar in this time. It is incredibly powerful. It sounds like seeing these advancements, many rooted in the very principles you sought to understand, is both a vindication of your life's work and perhaps a source of new contemplation for you. You mentioned it raises new questions. What kind of questions arise for you when viewing this world? And looking back from your era to now, how would you describe the core of your philosophy or worldview that drove this relentless inquiry? What at its heart did you believe about the world and our place in it that pushed you to seek this integrated understanding?
Yes, whispers becoming a roar. That image, it stays with me. To see the principles I labored to grasp manifested on such a scale, it confirms, in a way, the direction of that lifelong quest. But you ask about the questions that arise now, seeing this world. Many, Arthur, many. Firstly, how is this energy you command harnessed and transmitted? It flows through unseen channels, powering these devices, lighting your nights brighter than any candle, moving objects with such speed. What is its nature? Then, the speed of information. Messages crossing continents in an instant. My own communications often relied on messenger, on horse, on ship, taking weeks or months. How do these signals, these waves, carry thoughts and images through the air? And your understanding of the very smallest things, of the stuff from which matter is made. It seems to delve into layers I could only intuit. Has this deep knowledge of the parts led to a greater understanding of the whole? Or has it perhaps fractured the vision? And what are the limits? Having achieved such mastery over nature's forces, do you feel closer to the divine harmony, or merely more powerful within your own sphere? These are the thoughts that crowd my mind. As for the core of my philosophy that drive you, ask about, it was, at its heart, a belief in the profound beauty and intricate design of creation. I saw the world not as a collection of separate phenomena, but as a single interconnected organism, a masterpiece woven from countless threads. The same principles that governed the flow of water guided the circulation of blood. The mechanics of a bird's wing echoed in the structure of a machine. Art was not merely decoration, it was a means of seeing and revealing this design. Science was not separate from art. It was the necessary tool for understanding the principles that made the art truthful, convincing, alive. My relentless inquiry was a form of devotion, a way of approaching the divine architect by studying his work. It was a compulsion to uncover the hidden laws, to see the truth beneath the surface, believing that in understanding the world, one might also understand one's place within, in it. It was a quest for truth and beauty, inseparable everywhere. Nature was the teacher, the inspiration, the ultimate authority. My task was simply to look, to draw, to measure, to dissect, to understand, and perhaps, just perhaps, to add something of my own small understanding to the grand tapestry.
Master Leonardo, that idea of your relentless inquiry being a form of devotion, seeking to understand the grand tapestry of creation and add something of your own small understanding to it. It's a powerful image. What did you hope that contribution, that small understanding captured in your notebooks and work, might ultimately achieve or influence in the world, perhaps even long after you were gone? And reflecting on that desire, what message do you feel your life and your integrated approach to understanding and creating holds for people grappling with the world and trying to contribute something meaningful today?
Yes, The small understanding. To think of it influencing the world long after my hand is still. It was not a grand plan for fame or legacy primarily. It was a hope, a fervent desire that by delving into the true nature of things, by seeing the connections between the flight of a bird and the flow of water, between the structure of a muscle and the design of a machine, one might add a stone, however small, to the foundation of human knowledge. That these observations, these drawings, these ideas might illuminate the path for others who came after. That the understanding gained might lead to betterment, to structures that stand more firmly, to devices that ease burden, to images that capture the soul more truly. It was a hope that by pursuing truth and beauty together, one could contribute to the ongoing revelations of the world's wonders. As for a message for those in your time, grappling with how to contribute something meaningful, look, simply look, look closely. Do not be content with the surface. Question everything. Draw, write, experiment. Do not silo your knowledge. The greatest insights often lie at the intersection of different disciplines. The artist informs the scientist. The engineer informs the artist. Do not fear to cross boundaries, to ask why about the things others take for granted. Embrace the struggle. The greatest works, the deepest understandings, arise from wrestling with difficulty, and find joy in the discovery itself, in the process, not merely the finished product. Be curious. Be relentless in your inquiry. Nature holds all the secrets. Your task is to see them.
Master Leonardo, that is a truly profound perspective, that your lifelong pursuit was a form of devotion, adding a small understanding to creation's grand tapestry, and that your message to us is to simply look and question relentlessly. It strikes me, sitting here, that this small understanding you speak of has, from our vantage point, blossomed into something immense, shaping art, science, and our very perception of what is possible. How does it feel, from your perspective now, seeing the ripples your insights have made across centuries? And if you could impart one final thought to everyone listening today, something drawn from your extraordinary journey of discovery across so many fields, what would that be?
Ah, yes, the small understanding, the whispers you called them, becoming something immense. To see the echoes of my inquiries amplified so profoundly across the centuries in your flying machines, your understanding of the body, the speed at which you manipulate matter and information. It is, how do I say this, a validation, a powerful, almost overwhelming vindication of that lifelong pursuit. It suggests that the path was not misguided, that the deep dive into nature's principles was not only worthwhile for my own soul, but held within it the seeds of future marvels. It feels like watching a tiny stream I carved grow into a mighty river, shaping the landscape in ways I could only dimly imagine. It is a profound gratitude that the effort was not lost to the sense of time, and a humbling sense that one's own small light, when focused intensely on truth, can perhaps illuminate paths for others far into the future. As for a final thought, a message from this traveler across time to all who listen, it is simply this. The world around you is a miracle. Do not walk through it blind. Engage with it, with every fiber of your being. Study its forms, its forces, its colors, its sounds. Draw it, measure it, question it relentlessly. See the connections between all things, the grand and the minuscule. The answers are there, laid out by nature herself. Your greatest work, your deepest joy, lies in the act of seeing, understanding, and adding your own unique vision to the astonishing tapestry of existence. Be curious, always. The journey of discovery is the most noble pursuit.
Master Leonardo, that is a truly profound perspective, that your lifelong pursuit was a form of devotion, adding a small understanding to creation's grand tapestry, and that your message to us is to simply look and question relentlessly. It strikes me, sitting here, that this small understanding you speak of has, from our vantage point, blossomed into something immense, shaping art, science, and our very perception of what is possible. How does it feel, from your perspective now, seeing the ripples your insights have made across centuries? And if you could impart one final thought to everyone listening today, something drawn from your extraordinary journey of discovery across so many fields, what would that be?
Ah, yes. The small understanding becoming immense. It is, as I said, a validation. To see the threads I began to weave, those quiet studies, those fervent drawings, somehow resonate through the ages, shaping your world in tangible ways. It is deeply moving, like watching a tiny seed I planted centuries ago burst forth as a mighty tree whose branches stretch across the globe. There is a sense of quiet astonishment and, yes, satisfaction that the relentless pursuit of truth, wherever it led, was a worthy endeavor. It suggests that the human urge to understand, to connect, to create based on that understanding is perhaps one of our most enduring and noble qualities. And if I were to leave you with one final thought from this peculiar visit across time, it is this: do not lose the wonder. Do not become so accustomed to the roar of your achievements that you cease to hear the whispers of nature, which are still the source of all true invention and all true beauty. Look closely, listen intently. The universe is an infinite book, always open, always waiting to be read. Continue to read it, with eyes wide and mind ever curious. For in that reading lies not just knowledge, but joy and a sense of your own extraordinary place within the grand design.
Master Leonardo, that call to not lose the wonder, to continue reading the infinite book of the universe with curiosity. It is a truly fitting final thought from someone who dedicated their life to that very pursuit. Hearing you describe the astonishment and validation of seeing your whispers become the roar of our modern world, it is quite incredible to witness. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your time, your insights, and your extraordinary perspective with us today. This has been an experience unlike any other, a direct connection to a mind that shaped so much of how we see the world, whether through art, science, or the simple act of looking. It has been a tremendous honor. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this truly unique episode of Podcast with Guest from the Past. Until next time.
Ah, Arthur, the honor and the astonishment were truly mine. To step from my time into this future you inhabit, and to see the echoes of my inquiries resonate so strongly, it is a profound gift. Thank you for granting this old man a glimpse of wonders he only dreamt of. And to those who listened, remember the whispers. They hold the secrets